It's about time. Our country seems to have found a little bit of its American spirit this 4th of July, but is that enough? Trump gave a really great speech this last weekend over at Mount Rushmore. We're going to talk about that and the mask issue, which has become a huge hot button issue. Then we're going to talk about the looming issue of the First Amendment, specifically our freedom of religion and what that looks like. Will the church rise up and address this, just tackle it head on? Then Kanye West decides to run for president 2020. All that and more on this episode of Deconstructing the Culture. I am your host, Elisa Steele. Hey there, thanks for joining me. For those of you who are my regular listeners, you're going to have noticed I took a little bit of a sabbatical last week. That was unplanned, but you know how it goes. Life, especially when there's a baby involved. No, I haven't given birth yet, just clarifying for those of you who are wondering, I am still pregnant. In fact, baby Steele will be 33 weeks tomorrow. So we are excited. We are approaching her due date and all that entails. Just very excited about the future. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So I hope you had an awesome 4th of July. It's legitimately one of my favorite holidays. I would say it's my very favorite holiday, but Thanksgiving is always going to be my favorite holiday simply because of the food and preparations involved in Thanksgiving. But 4th of July makes a very close second for me, which is why I feel like, honestly, for all that I tried to not let our crazy government and world affect my 4th of July, unfortunately, I do feel like this was the most subdued and sad 4th of July that I've ever witnessed, just on a countrywide scale. You're looking at parades canceled and rodeos canceled, and I just felt like a little bit of the American spirit was kind of suffocated, but you saw it leaking out in some interesting ways. For instance, in LA County, they had a ban on fireworks, but that didn't really work out for them because Americans will be Americans. And wow, I feel like it was a sign that we're just tired of this nonsense. We're tired of the hypocrisy. We are tired of the lies and the conflicting stories and the flip-flopping, which we will get to all of that more later. Basically, we're tired of being told that America is not worth celebrating. So if you look, there's a viral video in news stories circulating of LA County, and I believe it's taken from helicopter, and there are just fireworks going off everywhere, even though there is a clear ban. And I felt like that definitely was happening here in Florida. I mean, wow, this is my third Florida 4th of July, and I've never heard my neighbors get quite so wild with their firecrackers and for such an extended period of time. So that was exciting. It showed that a lot of Americans are still alive and kicking and kind of done, and they're over this, and their eyes are starting to be opened to what's going on in our country. But part of that American spirit that we got to see this holiday was Trump gave a really, really great speech at Mount Rushmore. Now, I've seen him speak in person a couple of different times, and I will say that when he was delivering the speech, I actually watched the whole speech, which I don't usually do because Trump speeches can be long and sometimes a little unpredictable, just depending on what format. I think some of his formats are a little bit more scripted than others. This one was definitely more scripted. Whoever wrote this speech did A+ phenomenal job. Truly a well-written speech, which is interesting because you wouldn't know that if you looked at the media headlines. All the media headlines right now are showing that Trump gave a divisive speech inflaming race relations and, you know, talking about Confederate. It's just ridiculous. They're not even misleading. They're just flat out lies. Much of the media coverage you're going to see about his speech. But I'm telling you, as someone who has heard and criticized Trump heavily for some of his less than perfect or less than great speeches, this was a very, very good speech. Truly, just it should be a point where we all come together and we all find unity. But unfortunately, our media aren't going to let us do that unless we are willing to see past the rhetoric and actually look into ourselves. So really great speech. If you feel like, hearing some uplifting, inspiring stuff, then definitely go check that out. Is actually really worth listening to. What part of it, though, I'm not going to spend, any more time talking about his speech specifically. I actually wanted to point out South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem gave a speech. And if you'll remember, she's the one that I hardcore praised a few months back, where she, if you remember from a previous podcast episode, she refused to give stay-at-home orders to her state, and the media trashed her for this. Oh my goodness, they trashed her, ripped her up and down because she refused flat out. She's like, no, I'm not going to tell my citizens to stay home. They have common sense. They can do their own thing. Like, they'll figure it out. Their health is their responsibility, essentially, was I'm obviously, those aren't her words exactly, but that was the message she gave. Well, her state threw her a parade because she's that awesome. I mean, it's making me feel like I want to move to South Dakota, except I know what the Dakota winters look like, so maybe not. But she gave just a great speech, and a little part of it is, she said, quote, across America these last several weeks, we have been witnessing a very troubling situation unfold. In real time, we are watching an organized, coordinated campaign to remove and eliminate all references to our nation's founding and many other points in our history. Rather than looking to the past to help improve our future, some are trying to wipe away the lessons of history, lessons that we should be teaching to our children and to our grandchildren. This approach focuses exclusively on our forefathers' flaws, but fails to capitalize on the opportunity to learn from their virtues. Very eloquently put by the South Dakota governor. And she actually noted in the speech also that this isn't happening by accident, that it's very deliberate, and that it's meant to discredit America's founding principles by discrediting the individuals who formed them, so that America can be remade into a different political image. 100% agree with her. We have been seeing a lot of, a lot of insanity in our world, but just the blatant disregard for any and all of the wonderful, wonderful things that have come from our founding fathers and the individuals in history. We know that human beings are flawed, duh. We know that every person ever who's ever had a statue made of them, or that we have statues of them, or even mentioned in history books, we all have flaws. But the truth is we are not putting forth these statues, the majority of them, we're not putting forth these statues to say that everything that they did in their life was commendable. That's clearly not the case. Martin Luther King Jr., quite frankly, there is strong, very strong, open evidence that he was absolutely awful and disgusting towards women. But when we put up statues of him and we celebrate a holiday every year in celebration of him, we're not celebrating his treatment of women. No, we're celebrating the good and honorable things that he did with his life and what those represent. And so in the same way that we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr., and not everything he did was squeaky clean by any means, that's the same with our founding fathers. And I think we know this inherently as American citizens, and we know this just as human beings. But the left is trying to tell you that an overwhelming majority of American citizens want to wipe out and destroy all history. That's not the case. Unfortunately, that is what is being covered, and we're seeing this destructiveness happening in our country, but America is worth celebrating. That's my point in bringing this up. America and her founding fathers and her founding principles are worth celebrating. Have we always lived up to our founding principles? No. Have I even personally lived up to my own principles? No, and neither have you. But just because we don't 100% live up to our founding ideals, it doesn't mean that the ideals and the founders behind them didn't have something really, really great and amazing going on. Now, in the world of craziness, actually has almost nothing to do with nothing, but I think it's so funny and ridiculous at the same time. I'm just going to throw it out there. The term master bedroom is apparently going to be going away in some areas. My mom works in real estate, and that's how I found out about this in the first place. Apparently saying master bedroom or master bathroom is like referencing slavery or some such nonsense, which is ridiculous. So some areas are trying to change that to primary bedroom and primary bathroom. So the next time you're house shopping, just remember, don't ask where the master bedroom is, ask where the primary bedroom is. Just, heads up, so we can all be woke together. All right, let's talk about the mask thing. I'm getting asked about this a lot. And if you'll notice, I have been rather active probably more active lately in the last month on my social media stories. So if you're looking to stay really caught up with where I'm at, you're going to want to head over to Instagram stories specifically, but some of that trickles over to Facebook stories as well. That's where I've been posting a lot. So some of you might already know some of my feelings on this mask issue. I'm going to be straight up with you. This issue has impacted me more in the last couple of weeks than it has ever before, simply because before it felt far away, it felt distant. So many of you have already been dealing with this much longer than I have. Where I'm living in South Florida, it wasn't mandated until about a week and a half ago, I think. And that has changed things for me dramatically. I went from kind of minorly thinking about the mask thing to really thinking about the mask thing, because I actually wore a mask a lot more when it was optional than I do now, simply because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm okay. I'm really okay with private businesses asking or requiring that their shoppers or employees wear masks. I'm really okay with that. They're private freaking businesses. I don't care. If that makes them feel better, if that makes them feel like they're avoiding liability, if that makes them feel like they're making their customers feel more comfortable, that's fine. You do you, boo. Like, I was going to Costco for months now and they've been requiring masks, and I walked in and I put on a mask because honestly, I don't really care. And if Costco wants to require masks, they're a private business. They have every right to do that. I wasn't going to fight that. I wasn't going to go boycott Costco because they're requiring masks. Quite frankly, it's probably a liability issue to them, and they're just trying to figure out as a company how they can avoid issues. And to them, this seems like the path of least resistance. That's fine if that's what they need to do for their business, or that's what they feel they need to do for their business. I'm okay with that. What I am absolutely not okay with is government mandating masks. That is too far. That feels like treading into the waters of government mandating vaccinations, which you'll know if you have listened to my podcast before. I've talked about that, and I have a whole episode on it. And I think it's called anti-vax or pro-vax. You can go look it up and hear my thoughts on vaccinations. But it feels a lot more like that. And that is when it comes down to the old rhetoric, my body, my choice. But legitimately, it is my body, not in the way leftists use it with abortion, which is clearly not their body. But the mask thing comes down to, no, government, sorry, that's not your job. That's really what it comes down to. The government's job is to protect my constitutional rights. That's their job. And my job is to protect my health. So government, you do your job and I'll do my job. So I'll decide whether or not I wear a mask. And I know, I get it. You want to do things in the name of safety. But you know what? That's how freedoms get encroached upon, when we allow our government to do things in the name of safety. That's how we get the Patriot Act after 9/11. And so here's the thing. I get that it makes some people feel uncomfortable to be around those who don't wear a mask. So I don't not wear a mask. If I'm going to be around people who are elderly or sick or just plain super uncomfortable around people not wearing a mask, I'll put on a mask, because I honestly, I do care. I do care about people and their feelings, even if I don't fully see eye to eye with them. I'll wear a mask, but not because the government says that I have to. That's when it's gone too far. And here's the thing too, I've seen everything. I'm sure you have too. I've seen all the stuff about how masks are super effective and you're wearing it not to protect yourself, but to protect others. Yeah, I've seen that. And I've seen the videos and I've seen the whole science whatever behind it. And guess what? I've seen the other side too. I've seen all of the information and the videos and everything about how masks actually harm you and they bring down your oxygen levels and like this and that. And here's the thing, I don't know. I don't know how effective masks are. In my mind, masks probably do something. What they do, not 100% sure, but there's a reason why I'm guessing, just logic here, I'm guessing masks do something because doctors and nurses and medical professionals have been wearing them for a while. Now, is that the same as mask use today? Homemade mask and masks that the general public is wearing and not washing and constantly touching and taking on and off, are those the same? My guess is probably not, but I don't really know. But here's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter which side of the mask debate you're on, whether you're on the they're extremely effective and everyone needs to wear it so we can knock out this virus, or whether it's masks do absolutely nothing except actually harm you. It doesn't matter what side you're on, because quite frankly, I don't even know exactly where I stand with whether or not they harm you or very helpful. But what I do know is that is not the government's role. That is not the proper role of government. And if you haven't read that, The Proper Role of Government by Ezra Taft Benson, you need to. It's small, it's short, it will blow your mind and help you understand whether or not it's the government's job to do X, Y, and Z. And it will help you decide, like it helps me decide all the time, whether or not it's okay for a government to tell us that we can or cannot do something. Is that the proper role of government? And in this case, no, it is not. Government's job is not to protect yours and mine's, your health and my health. Government's job is to protect our constitutional freedoms. And I'm sorry, but never ever getting sick by a novel virus isn't one of our constitutional rights. It's a risk of life. Driving in a vehicle, I believe the stats are something like 30 to 35,000 people a year die of automobile accidents. We still take the risk and we still drive every single day, and it changes our whole world and our entire economy, and we take that calculated risk. Living in a world where there is a virus, you take a risk, and the government can't protect you from absolutely everything. That's just not their job, and it's also not possible. Now, you might think, Elisa, sure, you're dealing with these mandated mask policies in South Florida. I'm not. I live somewhere where, like, let's say South Dakota, where it doesn't matter. It does matter, and we do need to fight this together, whether your state is facing it or not, because states I never would have seen this coming to have already seen it happen, from South Florida to freaking county in Salt Lake, where Utah is very, pretty conservative on the scale. Idaho, who the heck saw that coming to Idaho? I mean, this is, when we're looking at other states who are dealing with these just terribly tyrannical laws happening and edicts happening that are not going through the proper, proper channels for even happening in the first place. This is not some other country. We can't just be like, oh, well, that's happening in France. Oh, well, that's happening in Germany. No, this is happening in America. And if it's happening to one state in America, it's a risk to all American citizens that these overstepping bounds are going to be taken in our lives and in our own states and our own counties. So the thing is what it comes down to is, I don't really care where you land on the mask issue. I don't care if you're pro or anti-mask, as long as we can agree that we are anti-mandated masks, because that's not the proper role of government. Now, let's talk about the church and the church's role in this. And usually, and unfortunately, for like a while now, it's kind of been the status quo for churches to say, oh, you know what, we're a nonprofit organization. We can't say anything ever about government because we don't want to lose our status, our nonprofit status. I think it might be time for churches to step up, because it's encroaching on our faith in a very, very real way. Like I said, you can't just say, oh, it's happening far away. It's not happening in my state. It's not happening in my church. No, if this is happening one place in America, all of us need to come together and fight this, because it is happening in our America. California recently told their houses of worship that they have to discontinue singing amid worsening COVID-19 rise in numbers. According to CBSN, while you can still attend in-person church services in California, you can't sing. The state, to curb a rapidly worsening pandemic, has temporarily banned singing and chanting in places of worship. Quote, places of worship must therefore discontinue singing and chanting activities, the state's Department of Public Health said in their latest guidance for houses of worship posted last Wednesday. Practices and performances present an increased likelihood for transmission of COVID-19 throughout contaminated exhaled droplets, and should occur through alternative methods like internet streaming, health officials went on to say in an updated order. Oh, okay, I get it. So singing, so dangerous. Oh my goodness, it's going to give us a virus that has a 99.9% or 99.5% survival rate. So you can't sing or worship, which is very important in the Christian faith and many other faiths, okay? So singing at services has apparently proven to be one way to spread a virus, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Oh, so singing has been a way. Oh, it's been proven, singing, it can spread the virus. But I don't know, you can't sing not in houses of worship. That's like bad. It's going to like make people sick and you're going to kill grandma if you sing in church. But it's okay to go, rally or protest or march in the streets with hundreds, maybe thousands of people and shout and chant your little Black Lives Matter or Pride Month stuff. That's fine. Just singing, that's going to kill grandma, That's kind of how that's going. Among existing protocols, all houses of worship are also required to limit their attendance to 25% of the building capacity or maximum of 100 attendees. The order also says offering plates and similar items that move between people at places of worship have also been discontinued. This is wrong. Wake up, America. Wake up, Christians. When are we going to realize that this is not about stopping a virus? This is about control. And no, this is not some crazy conspiracy theorist crap. I don't like that stuff. That I am not one who buys into conspiracy theories, okay? I believe in facts and numbers and data, but this is pretty real. I'm sorry, but they've lost all credibility. They, as meaning our government at this point. They want to tell me that you can't go to church and sing and worship. You can't pass offering plates or take sacrament because we'll be touching things. And, we need to do everything to save people from this virus. But on the other hand, what? Oh, it's totally okay to go march and have thousands of people gather in Chicago and New York City for pride rallies. It's totally fine. You're not going to catch COVID there. And it's totally fine to go rioting and looting and protesting in the streets and behaving in terrible, lawless behavior. That's fine. You're not going to get sick doing that. No, this is about control. Wake up, America. Wake up, Christian churches. Do something about this. You should not be closing your church doors any longer, okay? You should not be going with these draconian edicts about not singing and not allowing your people to worship in God's house. I mean, what happened? What happened to just not only our patriots, but what happened to strong Christians? Just look at the example, just to take a couple, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They just wouldn't bow down to the king's image and they were going to die over it. Here we're being told you can't worship God. How many of us are willing to just say, no, not happening. I'm still going to worship God and I'm still going to go to church. I'm still going to gather with fellow believers. What about Daniel, who was thrown into a lion's den for praying to God? Are we going to be stopped because our government is telling us, no, you can't gather in houses of worship? Oh, it's fine to gather in hundreds of thousands for other things, but no, you can't gather at your church. No, because, we're telling you that you could get sick and die, even though it's not our job, to protect you from that. And it's totally fine. And when it fits our purposes, we'll let other people gather. But no, you can't gather to worship your God. That is wrong, sick and wrong, and very blatantly against our actual God-given rights and against our First Amendment. Just wrong. And the Bible does mention many times, just to name a couple of times, the Bible mentions praising. In 1 Chronicles 16:23-25, it says, sing to the Lord, all the earth, proclaim his salvation day after day, declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous deeds among all people, for great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. Psalms 100:1-2, shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth, worship the Lord with gladness, come before him with joyful songs. And this one feels really applicable today. Romans 12:1-2, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Are we doing this? Are we willing to follow the example of biblical heroes who said enough is enough? And when they were told that they couldn't pray to their God, or they had to bow down to another image that wasn't God, they were willing to stand And even if it took their life, we're going to, at worst, maybe have our lives ruined through fines and jail time. But are we willing to make the same sacrifices? That's something we all have to ask ourselves, and ask ourselves, how far are we going to let our government push us? How far are we going to allow them to take our freedoms, which quite frankly probably won't come back, because once you give up power, it is not released back to the people. History shows this over and over. Thousands are protesting, looting, and rioting, and when it fits the right narrative and the right bill, then that's totally fine. But it is not fine for Christians to gather together in fellowship and worship their God. That is a clear dividing line of this being about control, not about a pandemic. And that's not a conspiracy theory, that's just logic. So here's the thing too. Oh, and that's also not, let's not forget that at the beginning of this pandemic, we were releasing, in many places, we were releasing criminals, like actual real criminals, rapists, and people who have committed violent crimes. We're releasing them from jail because, a mask is supposedly not effective enough that you can't just keep them in jail with a mask. No, we need to release them so they could be safe. But now, if you don't wear a mask, then you could get fines and go to jail, because that makes a lot of sense. It's control, guys. 100% about control. Now, what I think is interesting and just highlights this, just, icing on the cake, is Forbes recently released a research that, or published research that determines that protests did not cause the spike in coronavirus cases. According to them, protests against systematic racism held in 300 plus cities following the death of George Floyd did not cause a significant increase in coronavirus infections, according to a team of economists who have published their findings in a 60-page paper released by the National Bureau of Economic Research. These somewhat surprising results are supported by COVID-19 testing data in many populous cities where demonstrations were held. Research found that no evidence that urban protests reignited COVID-19 case growth during more than 3 weeks following the protest's onset. Okay, so if you're protesting systematic racism after George Floyd, then you know what? COVID just knows. That's what I'm learning from this. COVID just knows your heart, and it knows you're protesting for a worthy cause. And so it just jumps right over you. But don't you know, if you sing in church, definitely gonna kill grandma, and you're just like basically guilty of murder, so you better be wearing that mask or you're gonna be put in jail, where we release the violent criminals from, because we wanted to protect them from COVID. And yeah, don't be singing, or else you're gonna be having some consequences. But if you need to protest, hey, that's okay. It doesn't cause any spikes at all. That's what I'm hearing from this, loud and clear. And this is not the only example. There's example after example. In fact, in the study's lead author, I think this is just disgustingly hilarious, this dude from Bentley University said, in many cities, I guess his name is Devahal Dave of Bentley University, in many cities, the protests actually seem to lead to a net increase in social distancing, as more people who did not protest decided to stay off the streets. Oh, so what you're saying, Mr. Dave of Bentley University, is actually these protests helped to bring down the pandemic. Don't you know? They actually had a net good, because, people were staying in their homes. The ones who didn't protest, they were, so we should have more of these, because it actually, oh my gosh, give me a freaking break. Are you kidding me? And they're saying that it's maybe because the protesters were outside, that maybe that's why. Oh, okay, well, if that's the case, then why do we have all the public parks closed? And why can't we go to the beach? Yeah, explain that one to me. Because 4th of July just happened, and all of Florida decided to shut down their beaches because they didn't want us getting, vitamin D and sunshine and being socially distant, because nobody goes to the beach and likes to sit close to each other in the first place. Yeah, okay, because that holds a whole lot of water. They have burned their credibility to the freaking ground. And I think the day the experts might have officially lost their credibility, because they didn't, 100% lose it when they were releasing criminals and other things like that. Well, it might have been on June 4th, when more than 1,000 public health workers signed a letter claiming that protests were, quote, vital to the national public health and to the threatened health specifically of Black people in the United States, unquote. These woke corporate press came together and scrambled to assure us that no, it wasn't hypocritical at all because, quote, health is about more than simply remaining free of coronavirus infection. Oh, okay. So health, yeah, not just about, remaining free of the infection, but these protests, they're totally fine because, the protests are really important to the health of Black people, don't you know? Oh my gosh. And let's not forget that they totally threw out the window all of the disgusting and terrible statistics saying what happens when you force businesses to close, and lockdown orders destroyed tens of millions of American jobs and ruined businesses and livelihoods and caused a sharp uptake in suicides and drug overdoses, and not to mention domestic abuse. And can we just talk about the fact that this has impacted just about every single person's life on an individual level? Okay? Just my in-laws, they own a trampoline park and it's completely shut down, closed forever, will never open again because of COVID. And I'm sure you can tell me your story too. It's real. And the hypocrisy over closing our country and ruining livelihoods over this, and then closing down our churches and violating our religious freedoms. But it's fine. It's fine to protest or rally for gay pride or for Black Lives Matter, an openly communistic, terrible organization. Yeah, okay, I trust you. Totally. Absolutely. Before I continue on, I'm going to ask you to please subscribe and leave a review. If you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell next to the subscribe button so that you know when new episodes are published and you don't miss them. If you are on iTunes, please go ahead and leave a 5-star review, but also write something nice. It can be something short, or you know what? You don't even have to write something nice. Just write down something. Write down, tell me what you did today. But leave a review. Really helps with the rankings. All right, Kanye West wants to be president. How funny is this? I mean, it's only funny because our world's already so chaotic, and then Kanye West wants to add himself to that. I don't know if this is serious or a joke, just saying. Could come out that he's like totally not serious, but on Saturday, I think, he tweeted that he's running for president. I don't know how the heck he expects to do this because the election is only 4 months away, and he still would have to register with the Federal Election Commission, which I don't think he's done. As far as what I've read, he's not done that yet. He has to present a campaign platform. He has to collect enough signatures to get on the November ballot, and a lot more. And on top of that, he's already missed the deadline to even file as an independent candidate in many states because each state has its own rules on how that works. And I'm just thinking, you're nuts. But how much more nuts can this 2020 get? I guess we'll find out. Besides his wife, of course, who just retweeted with an American flag, he has one notable endorsement. Apparently, Tesla CEO Elon Musk tweeted, "You have my full support." All right, then. Yeah, Elon Musk and Kanye West teaming up. Let's see how this goes. Yeah, this is ridiculous. Especially it confuses me because he's said he's such a huge Trump supporter, but I think maybe there's been some diverging of roads because I think Kanye West came out hardcore in support of all this Black Lives Matter stuff and Trump's not so much. So we'll see. Either way, regardless, I would never vote for him. Just not that you asked, but I'll tell you anyways, because honestly, I've read some sketch stuff from him, but also in like May 2018, when he was talking about if he were to ever run for president, if he were to run, his platform would be a quote, the Trump campaign, but maybe the Bernie Sanders principles. That would be my mix. Now, this was 2018. He could have changed since then, but I don't know, and I definitely wouldn't trust it. So in case you're wondering if I'm going to vote for Kanye West in 2020, the answer is no. All right, let's go ahead and end ourselves on some pro-life good news. So, couple of things. The Tennessee legislative body passed a bill banning the killing of preborn children after a detectable heartbeat. Now, is this ideal? No. Obviously, as a staunchly pro-life person, I want to see abortion off the table altogether, even before there's a heartbeat. But is this a step in the right direction? Absolutely. Yes. And what I love about this is that this was House Bill 2263, and it passed the Senate by a great margin, which is great. But it also bans abortion due to the child's sex, race, or due to a diagnosis of Down syndrome. The bill's only listed exception is to save the life of the mother, which, I've talked about this before and I'll talk about it again in the future. This exception is not needed. And I've talked about this, and you'll definitely want to check it out if you're not familiar, but this exception is not needed because there is no medical reason why an abortion would be necessary. You can find more. I have some resources saved in my stories on Instagram if you want to go read more about that. There are no exceptions for rape or incest, which is amazing because a person's life is not worth less or worth killing simply because of the sins of the father. And we should not be killing children because of the way that they were conceived. It's not their fault, and it doesn't take away their human life or their status as a human being. Now, the thing is according to this, the ACLU ACLU responded that they would immediately challenge this law in court, but because of the way that this was constructed, this bill differs others that have been challenged in the courts before because it includes additional abortion restrictions. And if the court strikes down the heartbeat ban, that the measure automatically goes to enact abortion bans at any week after basically 8 weeks. So according to Representative William Lamberth, it does it in such a way that we believe it's legally defensible. Every time we have passed a measure that was in favor of life in the womb has been challenged in the courts. This bill is on such solid legal footing. We feel good about the fact that it could save millions of lives, and those are the most vulnerable because they're still in their mother's womb. So I'm very excited about this legislation. Obviously, it's not ideal. I would like to see abortion banned altogether, but this is a great step in the right direction. And then last but not least, the story makes me smile and makes my heart happy because the youngest surviving preemie ever in the world, born at 20 weeks, 0 days, is finally going home. This little man, I think I'm saying this, Jeremiah Jekin Harbor Jr., was born at just 20 weeks gestation in December of 2019, making him the youngest surviving preemie ever. Born on December 20th, he weighed just 13 ounces and measured smaller than a hand. His mother and father told doctors when Jessica went to premature labor to do everything they could to save their son. They looked each other in the eye and they looked their doctor in the eye and they told him to just give him a chance. And I love this story because it shows that every single time you challenge someone, you ask them, okay, but one of the most common things I get, even from fellow Christians, when you ask them, okay, well, when does life begin? They'll tell you it begins when the child is viable outside the womb. Okay, well, when does that happen? And they'll give you some arbitrary time or whatever, but the thing is when the child was viable outside the womb changes almost every year. It changes with science. And that's what it comes down to, is showing that it is arbitrary and ridiculous to base your value of a human being on whether or not they can survive outside the womb, because science, as it continues to progress, will continue to show the younger and younger and younger that we can keep children alive outside the womb. And 21 weeks and 0 days pushes that limit further than we've ever seen it before. And this is a win. And it shows what we pro-lifers already knew, that life begins at conception, and you cannot decide a person's value based on whether or not science today can save their life, because science tomorrow might be able to save their life. All right then, guys, that wraps us up for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Deconstructing the Culture. I am your host, Elisa Steele. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the podcast. Please remember to subscribe, leave a review. For those of you who might have wondered, today I'm wearing Culture of Life. Culture of Life is a pro-life fashion company that gives back a percentage of their proceeds to the pro-life movement. Use code ELISA, that's my name, ELISA, to get 10% all of your shopping at cultureoflife.com. Have a great day. God bless you.